Well, hello everyone. It's John Lockland here. I'm the director of Forum for Democracy International. Delighted to welcome you to this week's forum with my co-hosts Peter Lavelle from Moscow and Jeremy Nell from South Africa. I'm speaking to you from Paris this week. I just got back from Vienna this morning and I'm off to the west of France when the show is finished. The subject of our discussion this week is artificial intelligence. Ever since Karel Čapek's novel from, I believe, 1922, RER, which foretold a world in which robots would have taken over, and ever since Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, which tells the same story, people have fantasized about what will happen when computers become more intelligent than humans. And we're delighted to welcome this week as our main guest, Jobst Landgrebe. Jobst, where are you joining us from?
From Hamburg, Germany, and thanks a lot for the invitation, John. I'm delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. Perhaps you could tell us about your background, because you have written a book explaining that, in fact, artificial intelligence is not to be feared after all.
Yeah, so my background is I'm a physician, biochemist, and mathematician, and I've been working with artificial intelligence theory and also applied since 1998. So that's now 27 years, I reckon. And and in this time, I've seen the evolution of this part of mathematics and what you can do with it. And I think I have a very, experienced and balanced view of this field of science.
And you've written a book to allay some of the fears, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's called Why Machines Will Never Rule the World. I wrote it with my friend and colleague Barry Smith. It's a complicated book. It's a theory of science book. So it's not a popular book. Nevertheless, it's now appearing in second edition because it was sold out. I think that has to do with the fact that most people are afraid of AI and don't see it as a tool. But in reality, it's a tool like all the tools that mankind has developed. It's just a very sophisticated one. And it's very, very hard to understand because you need a lot of mathematical knowledge to really understand it. But basically, it's like a hammer. It's just a tool. And you can use a hammer to hammer in a nail. You can use the hammer to kill someone. And the same is true for AI. It's just a tool. And the book explains this in a very complicated way. Why is this like this? And why artificial intelligence will never become intelligent. It's just a marketing name.
Exactly.
But there will never be artificial intelligence in the real sense.
Exactly. I was going to ask you, when did the phrase appear? Because computers we've had for an awfully long time. When do we start talking about artificial intelligence, which, as you rightly say, is not intelligent?
So in 1956, there was a conference in Dartmouth College where they were computer scientists. I mean, these were mathematicians and electrical engineers. There was no proper computer science at the time. They met and they wanted to attract more funding to their field of computer science. So they invented the term style to attract more funding, and it worked perfectly. And since then, it has basically become a term. Like an idiomatic phrase, it has become autonomous, and people misunderstand this label. They think they take it seriously, but that's wrong. It is just applied mathematics, and it was just a fancy name.
Well, I mean, can intelligence be artificial? I mean, that's one of the things I've always found very curious. Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll immediately answer that question on behalf of Jobst. And I'll tell you exactly what he's going to say. He's going to say you need to first define intelligence.
And so that's what I wanted to do. And so I briefly do it. And then I answer your question. So intelligence is the ability to spontaneously find a solution to a novel problem in the interest of the individual that finds a solution. And novel means that the problem must never have been experienced by the individual, that it must be completely novel, that the individual wasn't trained for the situation. And then, so for a good example is when you learn to drive a car, you learn a lot of stuff and you get trained. But then when you start driving on your own, suddenly you experience a situation that was not trained. And then your ability to react spontaneously to this situation in the way that, for example, avoids a car crash is intelligence. And animals also have this skill. And can intelligence in theory be artificial? It could, if intelligence would have certain properties. The reason why it cannot be artificial is that it has properties that prevent its mathematical modeling. And you can only make an artificial entity when you can model it somehow. And we cannot have a model of intelligence. And that's why it can't be artificial.
But surely there's another reason, Jobst, and that is that lies in the example you've just given of driving a car, which is that intelligence or our faculties in general, including our intelligence, are acquired through practice. When I say practice, I don't mean by repeatedly doing something to make it better, but by doing it. So you can't say you know how to drive a car unless you have actually driven a car. You can't say you know how to fly a plane unless you have actually flown a plane. You couldn't possibly say I know how to fly a plane because I've read the manual and I understand aerodynamics. But a computer surely could never have that sort of experience, that kind of practical knowledge. And therefore, and if the structure of knowledge comes, as I believe it does, from doing things as much as from thinking, then surely there is no possible comparison between what a computer does and intelligence.
So what you do is that it's very clever. You bring an argument from the second edition of the book about practical intelligence. So we neglected practical intelligence in the first edition. So we have now a new chapter on it. But it's not completely true that you cannot have computers practice. So there's a method to train machines, which is called reinforcement learning, which does exactly this. So Google Translate the algorithm also to solve the game of Go and many other AlphaFold, many other very, very impressive applications of AI are obtained by this kind of practical training of the machine. So it's not, but that always happens in a closed world. So your argument is still right, because what you cannot do is give the machine such a type of experience in an open world. So this type of experience and quote unquote practical experience that machine can gain is only available in a closed world setting. There it works pretty well. That's why, for example, ego shooters, since already I think 10 years, humans have been beaten by machine ego shooters, because ego shooters are set in a closed world, and there you can let the machine acquire a certain artificial type of practical knowledge. But practical knowledge in the more general sense, which is also called know-how or personal knowledge by Polanyi, he called it personal knowledge. It's something that you are not even consciously acquiring. So you are basically unconsciously acquiring it while acting. And so we don't know how. Sorry, your turn.
But isn't really the essence of our human intelligence is our consciousness, and AI can never be conscious.
Yes.
This is, of course, also a very important argument. So we have a chapter already in the first edition about machine consciousness, and it's clear that machines cannot achieve consciousness. Why is that the case? What the machine does is it basically applies 4 types of operations, which are recursive functions, to series of symbols. And you can mechanically build a machine that can do these operations, which is what Konrad Zuse did with the Z1, Z2, and Z3 computers, which were all still mechanical. And then you can, of course, also have this with electricity, the application of these functions. And then you have a computation machine, or call it computer today. But it always only applies these 4 functions that Turing and Church defined. Turing defined them using the Turing machine. Church defined them. Alonso Church defined them at the same time in another way, but basically it's always a combination of these functions that gets applied. The machine is just circuitry which is running, and there's no consciousness at all. Also, it will not spontaneously arise as in Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey, because we don't know how consciousness comes about at all. It's a miracle, really. We can observe consciousness in us and also in animals and in other human beings. How we perceive consciousness is a big philosophical problem, which we cannot discuss now, but it's a huge problem in philosophy. But basically, we don't know how it works. And therefore, we cannot have a mathematical model of it, and therefore we cannot build it. And at some point in the discussion, I'd like to come to the core reason why that's not possible, but we can chat on a bit longer without it. But I'd like to come to it at some point.
Well, it was very interesting is that the television series Westworld, at least the series, not the film, that was always the illusory goal of trying to understand consciousness. I have to say, everyone, I didn't finish the series. I don't know if they solved the problem, but I mean, I did appreciate the fact that was really an important issue that was being addressed, is that how do we attain our consciousness? And I know from public debate, that is one of the things we know least about is consciousness.
Well, let's go for it, Jobst. Let's not. Let's go for it. You want to talk about consciousness and the nature of mind? Let's go for it.
So I would like to explain what the core properties of the mind are that make it impossible to model it, because this is the contentious part of the book, which many readers or many of the public don't understand. I mean, all these Elon Musk-like fans of AI, and so basically, what all the systems that are intelligent are animate systems, and animate systems are by their nature complex, and they have 7 properties. And these 7 properties are properties were discovered in thermodynamics. So Immanuel Kant already said in 1791 in Kritik der Urteilskraft, he said that you cannot model animate systems, but only inanimate systems. He said that it would not ever be possible that a Newton, he writes, would rise up to explain to us the spontaneous formation of a blade of grass.
Yeah.
And instinctively, he somehow understood that that's not the same as the laws of motion that can be applied to planets. Though he himself was teaching physics at university, he had the feeling that nature and animate nature works differently. And later on in thermodynamics, it was discovered that there are 7 properties of complex systems. One is the evolutionary character. The other is they have element-dependent interactions, they have force overlay, and they have, and this is the most important one, non-ergodic phase space and drivenness. And so drivenness means that there's a flow of energy through animate complex systems that creates energy dissipation. So that, for example, when I take this glass now, right, and it would be completely calm, then I would have an ergodic system, because the probability of each water molecule to be at a certain place is the same. So if I draw now samples from this glass of water, I get always the same probability of finding the same composition. But if I start stirring it, I apply mechanical energy to the water, and I obtain turbulence. And this turbulence cannot be modeled mathematically, because energy gets transformed from mechanical energy into heat in these turbulences, and this is and in these vortices that form. And we know that we cannot model this mathematically. That's just a trivial phenomenon, but our whole body consists only of such phenomena where energy gets dissipated. And so whenever we have energy dissipation in combination with the flow through of energy, we have a non-ergodic phase space. And now is the core argument is the following. A non-ergodic phase space does not exhibit, it exhibits some patterns, like we have a sleep-wake cycle, breathing cycle, and so on. But overall, the system has a lot of behavior that is totally irregular. Like this conversation is irregular. And this irregularity cannot be captured mathematically. You can only capture regularities. So everything that we model mathematically about our body, which is also enables medicine, for example, or surgery, is the regular part of our body. But a lot of our mind-body continuum is irregular and cannot be put into mathematical pattern, no matter which method is used. And now is the key argument. AI, as we understand it today, allows us to distill automatically regular patterns from very, very complicated systems, right? So for example, if you look at the Los Angeles traffic system, it's super complicated, but if you make movies or you use sensors to capture the movements of the car, you can distill regular patterns. Like there's very little traffic on Sunday morning, every morning, but Sunday, they are from Monday to Friday, there's a lot of traffic between 6 and 9 a.m. Then there's again a lot of traffic between 5 and 7 p.m. and so on and so on. So you can find regular patterns, but which are based on social phenomena, and you can model them well, but you cannot, that there's a lot you cannot distill. And now to create intelligence, you would have to also be able to distill using machine learning, or how they call it, all the irregularities of human behavior. But these you cannot distill because the algorithms only allow the identification of regular patterns. And this is what most of the users and also engineers who use AI don't understand.
Well, you've given an explanation, Jobst, as I understand it, of life. Life, you talked about it as being, what was your phrase? The transmission of energy. So the energy bursts or whatever, which are irregular. But that applies to all aspects of life, particularly bodily, particularly the body. All right. It doesn't apply specific. It does apply also to, of course, to the mind, but it's not specific to the mind. Surely there are many other aspects of mind, specifically of mind, never mind body, which artificial intelligence can never conceivably have. For example, freedom, and never mind, and not to mention emotion and poetry and music and that kind of thing. But freedom cannot, by definition, exist in a machine.
Yes, but all of this is the case because the fundamental properties of the mind cannot be modeled. Consciousness cannot be modeled, the will cannot be modeled, and intelligence cannot be modeled. The person, as Scheler says, cannot be modeled. And you cannot have freedom without a person. The person is the source of freedom. And so that's why we also believe that people who are heavily handicapped mentally, who have an IQ below 50, they are not autonomous. Right, because they cannot have a full person. That's why we have in modern societies, in humanistic societies, which are ultimately Christian societies, created spaces for them where they can exist. And just a side remark, I think the degree of civilization of the society can be measured by how well we create spaces for these people, right? And if we do it less well, like in Germany in the last 30 years, it has declined, then it shows a decline in the humanism of the society. But going back to the core arguments, the core argument is we can only partially model life, but for animate systems, but for intelligence or consciousness, we would need complete models. And that would allow to engineer this. And this we don't have, and we will never have, because there are too many properties of these systems that prevent it. That's the core argument. And that's also true. Sorry, yes.
No. Sorry, just finish what you're saying.
And that's also true even if we make usage of the most modern applications of AI, which have inspired so much awe and fear, what is called machine learning. And I would also like to say something about why machine learning is a wrong term. But first, you go ahead, Jeremy, please.
Yes. So to simplify what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, even that mentally handicapped person with an IQ below 50, that person can still create or procreate, whereas a machine can only react. Is that correct?
Yes. So machine can only a machine can only do what it is instructed to do. So we create a set of instructions, and the classical way Ada Lovelace said this very clearly. When she was talking about her husband designed the first computer in the 1850s. He didn't build it fully because he didn't have the mechanical means to do it, but it was already basically a real computer. And Ada Lovelace said that this computer will always only be able to do what it's been told to do. And that's still today, of course, true of today's computers. And Alan Turing showed this very clearly in his famous paper about the Turing machine, that basically you can create a set of instructions. And modern computer programming languages make this more easy, but it's still a set of instructions. And then the computer can calculate the set of instructions. And when you create an AI model with machine learning, with so-called machine learning, you also create a set of instructions with the sole difference. And it's very important that this is now implicitly created. So all the old computer science programs that dominate also the AI software, because the AI software is always only embedded into classical software, they are made using explicit mathematics, while the machine learning algorithm is created using implicit mathematics, so that an equation is created that contains billions of variables that no one can understand anymore, but it's done under certain constraints, so to make it do what the human inventors wanted to do. But it's still a set of instructions that is completely static. It cannot procreate anything.
Yeah. But hold on, Jobst. There's a very academic argument that you're making, but on a real life, day-to-day experience, somebody asked me a few days ago about this, and I don't know what the answer is, so I'm going to throw the question at you. But if the advancement in artificial intelligence is expanding at an exponential rate, that barrier between what we perceive as intelligence and what is intelligence gets blurred, doesn't it?
So this is an argument that we deal with in the book, and I will now give an academic and a non-academic answer. And sorry for being so academic, but the point is that in the end, you can only beat this monster of AI fear with the full argument. There are many other weaker arguments you can use, like humans have a soul and machines cannot have a soul. These arguments have been made for decades, but I don't want to recur to them because I have a stronger argument. Now, with this evolution, exponential evolution, the AI evolution is not exponential. The AI evolution looks exponential to the layperson, but to a mathematician, it's very clear that the core of the idea was developed by Gauss and Legendre in around 1800. It's regression. These are regression models, and they are now very sophisticated, and they can now ingest a lot of data and run on huge machines. But the mathematical idea is still that there is a relationship between a set A and a set B, and that you compute the regularity in the relationship of this set. Like when you have a lot of emails and some are classified as spam, some are not, you can calculate with a regression procedure this relationship that makes humans decide. You can model what makes humans decide that an email is spam, and then you can reproduce this and get a spam filter. And this principle that you have two sets of data that relate to each other, and then mathematically estimate a function that can calculate this relationship, that's all it does. So there's nothing exponential in there, and that it will always stay like this, right? So either you have explicit mathematics, or you have implicit mathematics, which is estimating this relationship, and then you can combine them. This gives tremendous results. But there's nothing exponential. And why is there not? Let's look now at a practical example. And thanks for reminding me of becoming more practical. So if you use ChatGPT, right, you can ask it one question, and usually you get quite a okay answer. Like, give me a recipe for tomato soup. Which are the populist parties in Europe? How many states does Switzerland have? Provinces does Switzerland have? And so on. Now, when you ask, all these are questions relating to data that are very frequently found in the internet. Now, if you ask about a very special, late medieval philosopher, it already gets much harder for the AI to give proper answers, and it will create hallucinations, which are a series of symbols which are wrong. And this is already a sign of the limitations of this AI. Now, if you engage in a dialogue with ChatGPT or another chatbot, after 2 or 3 iterations, the results become more and more absurd. And why is this the case? Now comes the important point. Because the machine can only be trained for one question, one answer. Because after that, the number of possibilities, after 3 or 4 iterations, the number of possibilities to give answers exceeds the number of stars in the universe. And so there is a combinatorial explosion that makes it impossible to create the 2 training sets I was talking about. The 2 training, the right-hand training set that contains the results to the answers can contain 250,000 or 500,000 answers, but all of them have to be formulated, and all of them have, in the first training round of the GPT, have to be also supervised by human supervisors. It's very expensive. It's actually, there are 2 cost drivers for these models: human supervisors and also the computational hardware. And so it's both are finite, but the possibilities to conduct a dialogue are infinite. And so you cannot tackle this combinatorial explosion. And so there is no exponential growth. There's only polynomial growth. And this polynomial growth is saturating now, and we see it already saturating.
Can I ask you, sorry, what does that mean, polynomial growth? That was going to be my next question. If it's not exponential, is it linear, the growth?
No, it's polynomial means between linear and exponential. So actually, a linear growth is the simplest polynomial growth. But for example, f of x equals x cube is polynomial.
Okay, I didn't do very well in algebra, so let's slow down.
But you remember f of x equals x.
No, but the point is that exponential growth implies some self-generating system. That's the hidden agenda behind the word exponential. And you're saying that it's.
But sex leads to exponential growth, right? Because populations that reproduce freely without enemies, they have exponential growth because the x variable is in the exponent. And technology has never had exponential growth. Technology has ever only had polynomial growth. And now, and this is important, Jeremy, we see this not only in computer science, but everywhere, that we are getting into a technological saturation phase. And that has to do with the fact that a lot of the findings of physics that were made until physics stopped producing new significant results, that was around 1950, have been used up technologically. And so now it's getting harder and harder to make technological progress. But most of our contemporaries haven't realized this because they have been blinded by this progress of the last 25 years. But if you look at it from a perspective of physics and mathematics, you're scratching your head and saying, gosh, we've used up electrodynamics, we've used up quantum mechanics, we cannot apply general theory of relativity. So we have applied quantum field theory as much as we can. Gosh, so now how are we to make progress? And actually, if you look at all the fields of applied science, the technological progress is stalling.
Oh, you sound like now you're going into the political realm, because that's all stalled too. I want to go back to a question about freedom, because I really love John's question here. Why are we being taught to be afraid of AI? Because there seems to be a subliminal message, is that you will be replaced, you as an individual, you as a person, just don't really add up to much anymore, because the world is passing us by, and that and I think it's almost kind of a clarion call. You must submit, okay?
Yes.
Because it's everywhere, and I've always questioned that, and that's why my first comment was about consciousness. That's why if you don't have that, then it's just a mechanical a process as you presented. But why do you think there's this kind of campaign of AI? I mean, Mike, because John and I are in the realm of politics and society. Who benefits by talking like this?
Yes,
go ahead.
Yeah.
So let's start with the notion of freedom. Freedom, as we understand it here in this, so to speak, spontaneously formed club, is very closely related to Greek freedom that was developed in Athens in the 6th and 7th century before Christ. And these people were freedom addicts. And I'm not now talking about the nobility and the bourgeoisie of Athens. They were completely geared towards freedom, and everything was focused on this and how to preserve their freedom and to maintain it and so on. And basically, after they lost the Peloponnesian War, they were in big trouble because their freedom stopped. And so this freedom tradition has a very long history in the West. And I think what is very interesting in the 20th century is that for the first time, we see two strong trends that were anti-freedom. And different forms of collectivism, basically, which became more and more fashionable. And today, we live in a time of technocratic collectivism. Absolutely. And there's the woke technocratic collectivism, but there's also anti-woke technocratic collectivism, which is what Elon Musk and I think also Donald Trump represent. They are not really freedom lovers, They are also technocrats. And I believe that so to speak, the focus on the very core focus on the individual is a mix of classical Greek and Roman humanism and also Christianity. Because in Christianity, we have this focus on the relationship between God and the individual. And these two trends have merged in the Middle Ages and created a very powerful metaphysics around the individual, its freedom, its rights, and its also its dignity and autonomy. And I think this is now under advanced attack everywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Right? Not only in the West, also in China, it has never existed. In Russia, I cannot judge so well, but it's certainly under attack everywhere. And the AI narrative is part of a narrative that tries to draw us away. It's a fear narrative. And it tries to draw us away more and more from the notion of autonomy, dignity, and freedom, and towards collectivist ideas of domination and utilitarianism in the sense of Jeremy Bentham's panopticon. The idea was to supervise society so that the utility of the collective can be maximized. It's astonishing that this idea was born in 18th century Britain, but it was, right? And it has then always been a part of the so-called liberal tradition. You find it in all the liberal thinkers of Britain in the 19th century, this utilitarianism. And I think this is now in the West, this utilitarianism is one of the big drivers of this. And it's appalling, but that's where I see the cultural root of this AI fear narrative.
Yes, I that's a really good answer. But it's not a. Sorry, Jeremy. But it's not a coincidence that it was that utilitarianism grew in late 18th century England, because late 18th century England was where the Industrial Revolution started, and where, albeit at a very low level in Jeremy Bentham's time, but it soon took off, people started to work in factories. And the reason why utilitarianism is born at the time of the Industrial Revolution is that the utilitarians start to regard human society, and therefore human beings, as factory workers. They regard the society as like a factory, and they think of people as only, as we now say in management speak, human resources. All right, they don't think of them as people, they just think of them as a resource. So it's an inevitable, it's just a part of a mindset. And you're absolutely right to say that the fear has a political dimension, but it has a political root, and that is in a certain view of people.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jem, sorry.
There we go. Sorry, I had my microphone off. Jobst, I know Peter will like this question, but there is obviously a danger in AI, but it's not from AI itself. It's from the people behind it. And I guess it can be used, for example, in war even.
Yes. So what's your question?
Well, I guess how...
We should be afraid of the people that have this power, not the power itself.
Yes, exactly. So it's the same with nuclear fission. You know, nuclear fission is a great source of energy. It has now a big renaissance everywhere in the world, and it will certainly in the end of the 21st century, unless we master nuclear fusion, it will dominate energy production for many reasons, right? But nuclear fission can also use to create terrible weapons. And it depends just on the politics, how this technology is used. And the same is true for AI. So AI is not as dangerous as nuclear fission, but you can abuse AI. So
like with drones. But like with drones, like let's say you want to attack another country.
Yeah, so let me give you two examples from warfare. So one example is totally ongoing already in the Ukraine war, which is the most modern war ever fought. And in this war, both sides have a lot of AI, and mostly for observation and detection and measurement of the activities of the enemy. And they have a lot of different types of sensors, satellites, but also sensors on the ground for vibration, for sound, radar stations. And all these raw signals create a lot of data every second. And without AI, the patterns in these data would never be, no human being could actually utilize the data. So all the time, the AI is running to analyze these data. And when Trump said last week he was turning off the intelligence data, he was turning off all this machinery. And without it, you cannot conduct modern warfare. So this is one application. It for example, means when troops are retreating because they are losing, and the platoon commanders and the lower commanders are ordering them to retreat, in traditional warfare, they could save their lives. Now they cannot, because all these defensive AI detects their movement, and then the drones can be sent to kill them. And so you can basically, the kill rate now in Ukraine of the retreating Ukraine army is so high because of that. So this is one example. Another example are offensive weapons. Now in offensive weapons, it's much harder to build AI because the AI is not truly intelligent and it cannot spontaneously react to unforeseeable events. But you can have loitering. You can, for example, you could put drones into a town, passive drones at night, and program the drones so that they just destroy everything that moves the next morning. So they wouldn't distinguish between friend and foe. You would just deploy them. They would loiter on the streets. And when people start to get up and come out of their doors, they would kill everything. This is already possible today. And this is, of course, absolutely terrifying and horrible, and is an example of the abuse of AI. And there are many others. But yes, it's completely true. There is a danger in it. And I think AI should be regulated for warfare in the same way that ABC weapons have been regulated in the past.
Well, you know, so much of what we hear about AI, you've already mentioned Elon Musk or these technocratic oligarchs. So much of it is couched in replacing human beings, having machines and robots. I mean, there's a very strong market/capitalist element to all of this. Okay, how can we make more money and make people redundant so we don't have to pay their retirement and their health and all that? But I mean, are there people, and now I'm speaking very much as a novice, so I'm sorry if my question is naive, but I mean, why can't all of this computing power, sorry, I'll show how much of a Luddite I am, how about just solving curing cancer. I mean, could AI do that?
So let me give two answers. First of all, the potential of AI to reduce human labor is quite limited. So a lot of the human labor reduction has been done by the Industrial Revolution. It is about mechanizing the non-fine work. So the fine motorical work is very hard to mechanize. We describe it in the book. I don't want to give the details here, but it's very, very hard because the phenomenon of there are cycles of perception and motor action which are almost as difficult to master as language. And so they are out of the realm of computation automation. And there are a lot still in assembling a car. There's a lot of steps which still require this very fine way of acting with your fingers. So there a lot of potential has already been gained in automation, but there is still something to be gained. And in mental work, the possibilities of automation with AI are in the 5 to 10% max. And they will be realized over the next decades. But this is not at all what Yuval Harari believes, that people will be made redundant. And they believe this because they don't understand the nature of human activities. They don't understand how complicated even simple jobs are. Like, for example, delivery of parcels. Seems simple, but it's actually, it requires intelligence, and robots are not capable of doing it. And so for many, many reasons. And so in the end, the automation potential with AI is very low, and there's a huge bubble of misinvestment being formed. So they are spending billions on this in the naive belief of being able to reap this with automation. But if you are in it, and I've been doing it since 2006, I've spent my professional life in trying to use AI for automation, and I know what I'm talking about. It's super hard. Now let's come. And they totally overestimate this, and this bubble will burst at some point, and it will create an AI winter. A new AI winter. And now let's come to the application in cancer. So I did the last 2 years, I worked for a company as a head of research with the task of putting as much AI as possible into the drug discovery process. And so typically when you from target discovery takes 1.5 years or 1 year, and then it takes 5 years until you get to the end of the preclinical development. So 5 to 6 years. And now I think with all the AI, and I really know I'm an expert in biomedical AI, I'm one of the leading persons in doing this. I don't say that it's just not to boast myself. It's just I've spent my life doing this. You can get an efficiency increase of 15 to 20% if you're really, really good. And that's all. And that's because cancer is of course a disease of a complex system. So it's a dysfunction of a complex system. And we don't understand it. It's super hard, and we can only model partial aspects of it. It's a multi-genetic disease with multiple proteins contributing, not only proteins, also other molecules of the cell contributing to the disease. And the therapies we prepare are always only targeting one single molecule of the hundreds and thousands of molecules that contribute to the disease, or sometimes 2 or 3. But our interventions are utterly primitive. They're as primitive as our partial differential equations. Partial differential equations only contain a handful of variables. We can't do more. And so the interventions we do in cancer treatment are very, very primitive and based on very few variables. And so it's it shows a lack of understanding of the biology of cancer to believe that you can actually use mathematics to quote unquote model it away. Right. And when people talk about this, like recently when Trump came to power, Oracle, Larry Ellison was talking about they will now cure cancer. And all of this is actually Cartesianism. It's a naive belief that you can use mathematics to describe the entire world, like Laplace. Laplace believes that if you could measure all the movement of all the particles at one moment, you could predict the future. That's total nonsense, and it has been mathematically rejected by statistical mechanics, which is thermodynamics, but also by quantum mechanics. So we know today that this is just not true, right? We know it, but in the minds of engineers lacking education or historians like Harari, they still think that this can be. It just shows they don't know enough about the phenomena they're talking about.
But Jobst, is not a lot of this stuff also about perception. So in what is it, in the 80s was it Deep Blue that played Kasparov, and
I was thinking about this one too.
Yeah, and now they can probably make a chess computer that is unbeatable. That perception, therefore, could be that the human is subpar to the machine.
Also, to add on to that, because I was thinking about that, I was just remember Kasparov and Deep Blue, but Kasparov, he won, but I really liked his answer, and it stayed with me for the rest to this day. He told me his strategy because he'd lost to it before. And then he said he applied a different strategy. His strategy was not to win, but not to lose. He didn't want to lose. He wasn't trying to win.
So what he did basically is the following. So these huge successes of AI, they are also Go. Go is harder to solve. Solving a game with AI means to beat the human being, whatever the human being tries to do. That you just can always beat the human being. And solving AI was harder than solving chess because it has more possibilities. But in the end, these are closed world systems. And in closed world systems, the machine can always surpass human beings. Already in the 70s, we had databases containing the Encyclopedia Britannica, and the machine could search it in seconds. No human being can search the Encyclopedia Britannica in seconds. Google can search the internet in seconds. It's closed world problems. All machines will always beat humans in the same way that the primitive machines already built in the antiquity could also lift more than humans with a mechanical device and it was a pulley. Basically, but that doesn't mean that the pulley is better than the human being. It's just a tool. And so in a closed world setting, the machine can beat the human. But in an open world setting, it cannot and will never be able to. And that's what we need to understand. And so, yes, all these achievements are impressive. But if you think about why the human being is beaten, then you understand the limitation. That's what you have to do. And then you also see that it's cleverer to be modest and understand the limitations, because, to put it bluntly, even if you just think of it from a purely economic perspective, you can make more money if you know the limitations than if you have illusions and misinvest your money into it.
So is the existential threat that Elon talks about, for example, and many others, is that threat not the machine itself, but it is the human mind choosing to become subservient to the machine?
So I think the existential threat Elon Musk is talking about doesn't exist, because he really believes that the machines will have consciousness, a will, and become evil and then become our masters and rulers, like in the series with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator. That's absolute nonsense, and it just is a sign of a lack of education. And with lack of education, I mean very fundamental lack. It's not only lack of mathematical and physics education, it's also lack of knowing the peak of the philosophical evolution of Europe that happened in the 1910s. Max Scheler, Edmund Husserl, the early Heidegger. This is the peak of the evolution of our knowledge about the human mind. And since then, we've had a decline with analytical philosophy and also postmodernism. And if you know these classics, or Max Weber as a sociologist, and this, peak, or Ernst Cassirer, all these philosophers, sorry, many were German speaking, it's not my fault, then you basically have a better understanding about this. And all these modern prophets of the dangers of AI, they don't understand this. Now, to come back to your question, the real danger is of course the political abuse of AI. For example, for digital technocracy, right? So that you can try to apply it everywhere, and then punish people because of their misbehavior,
Absolutely.
Restrict their freedom of action, herd them like cattle using digital constraints, making money, restricting, for example, the reach of money, or with forbidding people to be able to enter into certain areas or shops, because, like in COVID, it was prototyped, right? And so I couldn't shop, and in many shops in Germany, and I could only order the stuff online and so on. And I think this is the danger. It's the abuse, but AI in itself is not at all dangerous, and it's only about will it be abused or not. And now comes another solace. My view is that any society in human history since we have urbanization has never had a slave rate of above 25 to 30%. So even the toughest slaveholders, like the Arabs in the 14th century, who were heavily importing slaves, or the Roman society, which was a slaveholder society, Greek society, they never had more than 30%. It's impossible to keep more than 30% of the population in slave status where they have completely lost their autonomy. So a slave is just an object. You can kill a slave when the slave annoys you, without being punished. And this you can only do with up to 1/3. So of course, imagining a society, modern society with 30% slaves is not a nice perspective. But on the other hand, it shows the limitations. And I think this is a hard boundary that is almost independent of the culture. So it's a hard boundary. So even if you think of the worst case scenario of enslavement and trying to put everybody into 50-minute cities and so on, I think there will be a limit where there will be collective disobedience. And with collective disobedience, which Mahatma Gandhi described as a tool to overcome the rule of the English, it always worked. When people like electric cars, people have stopped buying electric cars. They just collectively disobey the will of the elites to make these heavy battery cars, as I call them, the only alternative. They just won't buy them, with very few exceptions, like Norway, which is putting so much subsidies that they dominate there. But everywhere else, Norway is a paradoxon anyhow, but everywhere else, people stop buying them. And this collective disobedience, you will see it more and more. And this is what I think where I put my greatest hope into, by the way.
Yes,
There's an interesting.
Sorry, go on, Joe. No, okay,
no, I was just going to say.
Go ahead, because I like. It's very important to hold on to this thought that what matters is who is controlling the AI and not what the AI is, as it were, itself doing. You've mentioned Jobst, you've mentioned COVID, you've made an indirect allusion to CBDCs and to all the social control which people think they will allow. There's another development, you're probably aware of it, but you haven't mentioned it, within the legal profession of self-enforcement. Laws are, of course, there are far too many laws. They're generated. There's an inflation of laws. In the last 4 years, I think the European Union has produced 13,000 legislative acts, which is obviously far beyond the capacity of any one person to ever read. Even lawyers haven't got the time to go through this stuff. At least not all of it, but individuals. And so there is the new doctrine of self-enforcement, which is a kind of automation, if you like, of enforcement mechanisms. And I think that if people start to believe in that and start to put that forward as a public policy, that will surely be very dangerous indeed. In other words, we don't even have to go to the rather sinister world of COVID social control and credit ratings and so on. It could be that the managerial philosophy behind AI could enter into something very mainstream, such as law enforcement.
Now, I mean, to be honest, self-enforcement is one of the characteristics of modern societies as described by Max Weber. So he calls it the iron cage of Eisernes Gehäuse der Hörigkeit. So iron cage of subservience or something. I don't know the English translation. It's also not so easy to translate it, but it means that people internalize social norms and obey automatically. And this is, of course, a hallmark of modern society and of alienation, as Karl Marx called it.
No, I'm talking about a system in which some alleged infraction would be detected by a machine, and then a procedure would be launched.
Yes, I'm coming to this. Now, the first source of making societies work is that people internalize social norms. Now you are talking about another layer of enforcement that gets automated. And now we have to ask ourselves the question, how can this be done? And now, interestingly, most of human behavior cannot be understood by machines. So machines cannot understand language. Machines cannot understand actions that occur in sequence. So if you make a video of a shoplifter, it's very hard for the machine to identify the shoplifter, because the shoplifter, so I might put something in my backpack because I don't have any more space in my to carry it, but still be willing to pay it when I leave the shop, but the machine might be programmed to detect me as shoplifter. right?
Yes.
But I'm only shoplifter if I don't pay and leave the shop. So basically, such for us simple relationships are very, very hard or impossible to teach to machines in all their variability. And so therefore, for the automatic enforcement of social norms and laws, you cannot use a machine. That's also why AI cannot be used to really enforce censorship. So what you can do, you can use the AI to pre-filter conversations or texts, but you always need a human being to do the ultimate act of censorship, because the machine will create far too many false positives and negatives, really a lot. So it will have an accuracy of 50-60% at best, but most of the also human beings who know that they are under supervision and under surveillance, they develop tactics to change their behavior so that they evade this. This can be observed in all societies. Karl Marx calls this the tool destruction by the slaves. It's a very good example. So he analyzed why slaves keep their tools, why the half-life of a tool that is used by a slave is shorter than by a paid laborer. And that's because the slaves harm the tools because they hate their work and they don't identify with their work. And so this is a typical way of human beings to circumvent these types of mechanisms. So I'm very optimistic that this automation of enforcement of complex norms by machines is almost impossible. Okay. But what is possible is that you have to acquire a digital certificate and show it to enter somewhere. So if you can simplify this, then you can get machines to enforce it. But you will not be able to make a video of a human being and then enforce anything without the intervention of another human being.
Yeah. Jeremy, you had a question.
I was so fascinated by what you're saying now. I forgot what my question is.
One of the things one of the things I'm going to take away from this absolutely fabulous conversation is that when I turn on my computer in the morning, I'm going to say, I'm not afraid of you, okay? I'm smarter than you are, okay? And you know your place. I say that in all seriousness because I find, applications and stuff like that. I need help sometimes because it's not intuitive to me. It's not intuitive thinking. But now I feel rest assured that I do have a modicum of being able to control my destiny after this conversation.
Yes,
I've just remembered.
Yes,
yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jem, and then I've got a final question. Go ahead, Jem.
Jobst, when I spoke to you last, you made an interesting comment. I think you made this comment, but AI falls into this category of an invisible enemy. And funnily enough, in the last month, Bill Gates made a statement about humanity needs to be aware of the invisible enemies. And he specified AI, climate change, and pandemics.
Yes.
Now, based on that, I'm not afraid of AI anymore.
Good. I mean, these are three of the main fear narratives. They are fear narratives. They have a religious character. I didn't mention this, but with the secularization and the loss of Christianity, people are now susceptible again to pagan narratives. And these three narratives are neo-pagan narratives that have the same. If you read the Old Testament, you will find descriptions of pagan narratives, right? And how dreadful they are. And basically, the dread comes from this irrational fear that is related to them. And when you're a Christian, you are immune to this, right? These are man-made pagan creeds that are ridiculous. AI is not dangerous. There is no, and the other two phenomena are also basically lack scientific evidence, right? And so if you have a clear mind, you don't have to fall for this. And the reason why people like Bill Gates are playing with this is that they believe that this allows them to exert power. These are power narratives. And because if you make people afraid, you can make them compliant. They believe. Yeah. Now, I think that this can work for a long time, but there's a very good passage in the power book, in the book about power by Bertrand Russell, where he says, if the propaganda goes against reality, at some point, everybody will notice, and then they will put an end to the propaganda. So that's my answer to this.
Jobst, could I wrap up by asking the following question? You've told us that AI can't cure cancer, it can't answer questions about medieval philosophers, it can't distinguish between a shopkeeper and an honest buyer, and it can't even deliver parcels. So what can it do, and what might it do? What might Leaving us, we all agree that about personhood and freedom and so on, and the fear tactics. What actually might change now from your perspective?
So a lot.
Not much.
So,
some things. What sort of things?
yes, so AI is a great tool. It's a great part of the Industrial Revolution. It's a way of using mathematics to improve our technosphere. So mankind has built since the 18th century what I call a technosphere, which is an altered version of nature, full of technology that makes our interaction with nature easier. Now it has dangers of becoming decadent and fat and untrained and so on. But basically, the technosphere is what mankind has been working on since the Neolithicum. And since the Neolithic revolution, and so AI is just one more step in improving the technosphere, and it has many advantages. You can simplify a lot of painful and boring work and get rid of it. The machine can do it. You can enhance the ability to find information. You can find new patterns. You can enhance science. I use it as a scientist since 25 years. A lot of the things I found because I was using AI. So it's a fantastic tool. I love it. And the last chapter of our book is about the positive aspects of AI. It has huge benefits, like every clever tool. I like it a lot. That's why the subtitle of the book is AI Without Fear. Because if you see it as a good tool, you can do a lot of good things with it. And it's not at all this dangerous thing that Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Yuval Harari described, but it's a wonderful way of improving human life if it's put into the right action. Everywhere, in agriculture, industrial production, media, it has so many great advantages. You can do so many good things with it. So I'm really a fan of it. I've made my life of it since a quarter of a century, but I just want people to realize that it's very useful and will improve the way we can live if we use it in the right way.
Jobst, like Peter, I found our conversation absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure Germ has as well. In fact, Germ was the person who kindly found you for us, and I'm very, very grateful to you, Germ, for that, because it has been superb. Jobst, do you, apart from your book, where can we follow you?
So you can. Sometimes I use a bit of X and LinkedIn, but mostly I'm on Google Scholar, where you can find all my publications.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically it. And if you Google me, you get to my Google Scholar page, and then you can find everything.
Well, I think if you got on Substack, you would get a huge following very, very quickly.
I don't think so. You know why, Peter?
I think so.
I can tell you why. Jeremy is right that I have often too complicated way of putting things because I'm so overloaded with education, and that has to do with my parents did a terrible job on me by putting so much knowledge into me. I was very avid to get it, and I became addicted to it all my life. I've accumulated more and more knowledge, and so I don't know whether I'm so good for popular success. Nevertheless, I would like to tell the three of you it was a delightful conversation with the three very clever folks, and I really enjoyed it a lot. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thanks to everyone for watching and listening, and we look forward to seeing you all again at the same time next week. All the best. Thank you, Jobst. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jem. Bye.